So, how long does it take? How long is a piece of string? But you should be starting to see returns, in the first sort of 18 months at least, if not a little bit sooner. It depends very, very much on the specific use cases that you are deploying that AI for.
Now, I was really intrigued by the finding that you had today, that you put out today, that it's businesses in emerging economies that are most rapidly taking up AI. Is that because a lot of developed country businesses have big legacy systems that they're reluctant to replace?
Do you know what? I think it's a sort of a conflation of different factors here, right? I think the first is actually, let's give those developing economies the credit where credit's due. They have embraced these technologies and they're using them as a means to leapfrog, right? To be able to take a problem that they traditionally had and not incrementalize their way to solving it, but really take a leapfrog around that. So I think there's a huge amount of kudos due in terms of the embracing of technologies, the embracing of the art of the possible through AI. I think similarly, though, it's not that the developing economies are not doing this. They absolutely are, and at scale, right? What we are seeing, though, is often there is a lot of, as you say, technical debt, legacy IT that is holding folks back within that. And sometimes that is actually on the technical side in terms of needing to be able to modernize the way that their IT works. And that can often involve significant investments to be able to do that. But sometimes it's also organizational. How to actually get an organization to move and embrace what it takes to lead in a company that is more AI enabled. And sometimes that can just be harder when some more of those, orthodoxies, if you like, are more ingrained with some of our developing economies as well. So I think it's both. It's the technology and it's the human side of this. But, it isn't that the developing markets aren't doing it. They absolutely are. But what we're seeing is a real surge from the developing economies. So China, North Africa, and so on. And actually top on our list is India.
Right. Kate, I'm afraid we've got to leave it there. Lovely to see you again. Thanks for talking to me today.
Thank you, Ian.
Well, still to come here on Ian King Live. We'll be having a look at how global markets are doing this Friday morning. Stay with us.
Well, mental health care is overstretched for all of our people. The expert panel that I chair looked at mental health care in the round, and it included children and young people. And what we did was gather evidence both from patients and also from doctors and other healthcare workers, and we compared that to government data and other data that we could find, and we gave ratings for the mental health pledges that the government had made, and found that in all areas it requires improvement, and that includes children and young people. And the main problem was that access to mental health care wasn't as good as it should have been, or wasn't as good as it had been promised to be. And also when young people have a crisis, that crisis is not dealt with as efficiently as it should be. So it is worrying. It's not only worrying for children, though. Our expert panel, our work judged pledges that started to be made pre-pandemic. And what is a bit disheartening is that the pledges were not on track to be met before the pandemic even started. So the pandemic has undoubtedly made things worse. It doesn't alter what we found in our work, though, because we deliberately excluded the influence of the pandemic from our judgments. But there is no doubt that during the pandemic, there has been an increase in people having concerns about their well-being. And there is a debate about how much of that is actually legitimate concern. However, some of that concern has gone on to become significant.
Welcome back. We got some breaking news to bring you now, and this is quite a significant story. The High Court has been ruling on whether to overturn a decision or not to extradite Julian Assange to the United States, where he is accused of publishing classified military documents. Well, I can tell you the US government has won its appeal. That is at the Court of Appeal. Obviously, you'll recall that initially Julian Assange courts ruled that he should not be extradited to the United States, where he is, of course, wanted for publishing classified documents. The US government appealed that decision in the Court of Appeal, and it has won that appeal. Julian Assange, of course, currently being held on remand at Belmarsh Prison in southeast London. A very big, dramatic ruling there. You can see these are live pictures right now outside the Court of Appeal, where Julian Assange's supporters have been gathering. He has, of course, had some very high-profile supporters on his recent court appearances, including the former leader of the opposition, former leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. He has been among those who have gathered outside the courts in the past, where Julian Assange has had his courts cases heard. So just to reiterate that breaking news that we have just received, the US government has won in the Court of Appeal on its the original High Court decision not to extradite Julian Assange to the United States, where he is accused of publishing classified military documents. As I say, the court ruled earlier this year that he should not be extradited. The US government has won its appeal in the Court of Appeal. As I say, these are live scenes. There is Julian Assange. As I say, I'm not sure whether he was actually in court today. He has been on remand in Belmarsh Prison, the former WikiLeaks founder and whistleblower. The United States obviously has been fighting for many years to extradite him to the US. You will, of course, recall that initially he was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy here in London for a number of years. That was while an earlier extradition request from the Swedish government was going through the courts there. The Swedish government wanted to extradite Mr. Assange on allegations of sexual misconduct in Sweden. That case was eventually, of course, time barred by the lapsing of time. So the Swedish government dropped their attempts to extradite Julian Assange. In the meantime, of course, the US went ahead with their calls to extradite Julian Assange. We will have more on that as we get it. Well, the latest disappointing GDP figures sent sterling slightly lower on the foreign exchange markets as traders concluded they give the Bank of England further cover not to raise interest rates. As you can see, the pound off of 0.1% against the US dollar. It's more or less at a year's low against the greenback right now. It's all more or less unchanged right now against the euro. Well, on the equity markets, equities had a pretty lacklustre session in the Asia-Pacific region overnight. There were modest falls in Shanghai and Mumbai, while Sydney fell by nearly 0.5%, and Tokyo and Hong Kong both fell by 1% apiece. Well, in Europe, markets are going into the weekend on a downbeat note. All of the major indices right now in negative territory. The big market story in Europe today is Daimler Trucks, the commercial vehicle maker, the biggest in the world, in fact, made its debut today in Frankfurt after being spun off by its parent company, and it's made a solid start to life as a listed company. economy. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 is just about in negative territory. Broad-based sell-off, off 0.1%. They're led by the drugs heavyweights. In percentage terms, the biggest faller is JD Sports, which, as you can see at the bottom of the screen there, is off by some 2%. Not too many gainers to mention, but Barclay Group, the house builder, ahead by nearly 2%. That's following its trading update on Wednesday. A lot of love for that stock right now. Outside the FTSE, Dr. Martens has rallied by 2.75%. It sold off yesterday on the back of a trading statement. No one could really understand why, but it's rallied this morning. Among the big fallers among the mid-caps, the North Sea oil and gas producer Harbour Energy. Its shares are off another 4%. That follows an 11% fall yesterday, following a disappointing update on gas production. As for the oil price, that's been slightly higher this morning as concerns over the Omicron variant start to ease. A barrel of Brent crude will currently cost you $75.59 a barrel. That's up nearly 0.25%. The crude price currently on course for its biggest weekly gain since late August. Well, joining me now is Fidelity International's Global Head of Macro and Strategic Asset Allocation, Salman Ahmed. Salman, very good to see you this morning. What did you make of the GDP figures? Do you buy into this consensus that this means there's going to be nothing from the bank in the near future?
Good morning, Ian. So basically, it does give some room to Bank of England to pause a little bit for to see the real impact of Omicron coming through, especially on the back of the new restrictions that were put in place. But it still doesn't change the underlying picture, which is that inflation is very high in the UK, and it will push the central bank to take action in the form of tightening of interest rates. So it may pause the whole journey, but we don't think it has the potential to reverse the pathway we are on, which is increasing the cost of money going forward.
Salman, what about the bigger sort of macro picture here, which I find quite intriguing? You've obviously got the Federal Reserve starting to tighten monetary policy right now. The People's Bank of China undertook a little bit of monetary easing this week, with potentially more to come. We're seeing a bit of a divergence in the world's two largest economies.
Definitely, Ian, and is driven by their own domestic picture. In the US, we have a combination of a very strong labor market and, of course, like the UK, very strong inflationary impulses, whilst the reverse picture is true in China, where because of the severe policy shift, especially focused on the property sector, and then the fact that inflation is still quite subdued, the central bank is pursuing a very different pathway, which is to put easing in the system, fine-tune via credit growth or increased credit growth, in order to mitigate the impact of those negative macro forces which came through as a result of the crackdown on property, whilst US is still benefiting from this very strong recovery, the very massive fiscal stimulus which were done previously, and that has also shown up in some shape or form as higher inflation. So certainly a strong divergence, and something we think will continue in 2022.
How concerned are you by this news overnight that Fitch Ratings Agency has formally declared Evergrande, the Chinese property developer, to be in default? There's been a lot of speculation about what knock-on effects this might have.
So I think a lot of the pain coming through that crackdown, which started a few months ago, has already passed through the system. I think there is a restructuring, state-led restructuring going on and underway when it comes to property sector, especially Evergrande. So we are, I think, less concerned about this news compared to when it first hit a few months ago, that, there is this significant policy shift. So the shock value has come down, and also buffered by the fact that there is clearly easing going on and fine-tuning going on by the Chinese policymakers. So in that sense, the shock value is lower, and there is more clarity that there will be a state-led restructuring of this property group, which should help mitigate some of the negative spillovers, which was the concern of the market a few weeks ago.
Simon, one thing that I struggle with right now, certainly looking at the UK GDP numbers this morning, is how you reconcile that with what we're hearing from individual companies. I mean, a very good result. Construction's just had its worst month since April last year here in the UK. Yet we had very, very positive trading updates earlier this week from the likes of Barclay Group. Some of the house builders are clearly doing very well. Now, they're obviously not a proxy for the broader construction sector, but it's very difficult to sort of, reconcile these two things, isn't it?
Certainly, Ian, especially because of the nature of the shock, the volatility of macro volatility has gone up very significantly. So we are seeing a big strength in growth a few months ago, which has now started to tail off in October. But within that, there is a lot of dispersion. For example, the healthcare sector did very well. There has been, pressure on the restaurant sector after a big bounce back after the reopening. It is really the nature of this shock, which is a very strong sectoral dimension to it. But overall, underlying forces of recovery are still in place. Of course, there has been some, more benign news coming from on the Omicron front. That is a critical risk factor, at least for the next few months. But having said that, there is this underlying strength in the economy, and the month-to-month numbers will look volatile because of this very specific nature of this shock, where it requires massive policy shifts over a very short period of time.
All right, Simon Ahmed, very good to talk to you as ever. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to go back now to the Royal Courts of Justice. More now on the breaking news that the US government has won its High Court bid to overturn a judge's decision not to extradite the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange. You can see Mr. Assange's supporters there. Well, our correspondent, Ali Fortescue, is at the Royal Courts of Justice. Ali, pretty busy scene there behind you.
Absolutely. The protesters that have been with Julian Assange throughout this long, convoluted legal process. Today, the High Court was looking at a decision that was made in the Magistrates' Court that decided not to extradite Julian Assange because his mental health was so poor. They said that he was at risk of taking his own life if he was extradited to the US. And today, that decision was overturned here in the High Court. They said that the package of assurances have been offered by America were effectively enough to mean that they thought that this extradition could go ahead, because America have said that if Julian Assange goes there and is found guilty, he can go to Australia to serve his time. They say that he will not be held for any time in their strictest maximum security prisons, that he will be looked at by a psychiatrist, and that was something that the two judges here at the High Court thought went far enough. So they are now sending this back to the Magistrates' Court and suggesting that they look at this with the Secretary of State. So a highly significant moment today in this long legal battle. Of course, it was almost 10 years ago now that Julian Assange first went into the Ecuadorian embassy avoiding extradition to Sweden over sexual assault charges that he always denied, that were later dropped, but always hanging over him was this threat of being extradited to the US after thousands of documents were leaked on WikiLeaks. He obviously has always said that this is about free speech. The US so say that he has broken the law by sharing highly sensitive secret documents, and today a step forward for the US in their battle to get Julian Assange to be tried on home soil.
Thanks, Ali. More on that story throughout the morning here on Sky News. Now, the number of people choosing buy now, pay later to make their purchases has grown rapidly since the pandemic, alongside the increase in online sales. For one company at the forefront of the technology is Zilch. It recently became the fastest European company to achieve so-called double unicorn status. In other words, to be valued at $2 billion. Its founder and chief executive is Philip Bellamont, and he joins me right now. Philip, you've just completed this extra funding round. How will you be deploying the capital?
Nice to see you, Ian. Really, for us, what this funding round means is that we can just accelerate the democratization of free credit here in the UK, which we're really excited about. So we're going to double down on building the team and rolling out even furthermore here in the UK. We're almost registering almost 20,000 people a day at the moment. So that's really exciting. And then, of course, we are going to be launching in Q1 in the US. So we're excited to take this phenomenal product and bring it to the US market as of Q1 next year.
And how do you view the competitive landscape in the US compared with here in the UK?
It's an interesting question we've had a few times. You know, it's for us interesting because when we actually entered the UK, there was a lot of competition here already. And what we're doing with Zilch is through technical innovation, effectively we're disintermediating all of the competition and really using the entrenchedness of some of these incumbents against them. So similar to, I don't know, Ian, if you remember that product we used to use called Skype, similar to what Zoom did to Skype is what we're doing now to Buy Now, Pay Later 1.0.
I mean, it's very interesting that you say that. I mean, the penetration of Buy Now, Pay Later is much deeper in the UK than it is in the US. Presumably, you think that gives you more to go for over there?
Oh, no, absolutely. And if we look at the US market, even if you just take e-com alone in the US, it's at about 1.1 trillion. BNPL is only about 1.8% penetration there right now. So, if you compare that to the UK, BNPL is almost at 5-6% penetration here in a 6 times smaller market. So we really do think that the sky's the limit in the US, and we certainly have something quite unique here that is resonating with customers. So we're excited to get started. We have a phenomenal waiting list already building there for us. So we really are excited to bring this technology across to the US in Q1.
I mean, most people assume that the typical BNPL customer is a Gen Z customer. Is it actually more entrenched through the generations than that?
It's a great question, because we do also get this a lot. People seem to think that this is only the younger generations using this product. Interestingly, if you look at our customer base, 45% of our customers are between the age of 25 and 35. The rest are outside of that and typically older than that. So what we are seeing is that even slightly more older generations are looking at this product and saying, hang on, why would I want to use traditional rolling credit and pay fees, interest, retrospective fees and interest? Why wouldn't I use a free way to defer payment and clear and concise installment payments to better manage my cash flow? And that's actually what we're seeing.
I've asked you this before, Philip, but how nervous are you about regulatory crackdowns on the sector?
Well, of course, Ian, as we all know, the FCA is taking a lot of guidance from the market. There's the consultation that's gone out. We are, of course, responding to this alongside, I'm sure, a number of others. We are one of the only FCA-approved buy now, pay later providers in the market today. We've had our license for almost 2 years already. So we're quite confident that whatever might happen will actually just, basically bring more protection to the end consumer. And actually right now where we are today, we are fully regulated already. So, we really feel we are in a strong position to lead the conversation in this regard, ultimately making sure that the consumer benefits from the consumer protections you would expect for a debt instrument. So we do expect the FCA is going to make the right decision and, of course, avoid over-regulating the space and driving people back to high-cost credit. But we welcome this regulation and are already ahead of the game in this regard.
And briefly, if you would, please, Philip, I mean, you've gone from about 25 employees to 210 in the space of just over a year. How many will you have if we have another conversation this time next year?
So, Ian, we're busy hiring about 150 people right now. That's going to be across our headquarters in London and now our HQ in Miami for the US. And so we're excited, obviously, to be building out our team stateside. And that's really the plan for now. Really what we're trying to build is everything we can automated. But as you well know, financial services businesses, particularly being regulated, requires a lot of corporate governance and compliance. And so we are certainly beefing up the business in this regard.
All right, Philip, good to see you again. Thanks for joining me today. Well, what do you do when the head of your company decides to step down? Twitter's chief executive, Jack Dorsey, is handing over the reins to the company's chief technology officer, Parag Agrawal. But according to recent research, only 13% of European boards consider succession planning as a top priority. Well, Monica Lagerkrantz is the founder and chief executive of BoardClick and joins me now from Stockholm. Monica, morning to you. That seems a very low number to me.
It is, I agree. Greetings from Stockholm, by the way. It's a worrying number. I think that's going to get some consequences during the next years, especially now when we see this war for talent going on all levels, everywhere.
Are there some sectors that are better than others at thinking about succession planning? I mean, I would assume a heavily regulated sector like banking might be a bit better at this than some others.
That's what you could believe. I'm not so sure, but it's for sure something they should be really good at. The problem is that I haven't seen any specific sector being better than others. Having been a board recruiter, a CEO recruiter for more than 25 years, this has come again and again as a challenging topic. I mean, succession planning. And that's why I'm so impressed by Twitter and Jack Dorsey. It's very rare. We see a young, successful CEO stepping down in a seemingly controlled process. Being a board recruiter, I'm also very impressed by the board of Twitter. I have to say, they have managed a smooth process. And that is a rare thing. And as you say, Ian, it's having succession planning high up on the agenda is very rare. Like 13% of companies in Europe do have that as a top priority, as you mentioned, and 50% of companies are not even happy with the quality of the succession plan. So, but that is also the reason why I created BoardClick, which is a digital platform saving hundreds of thousands of pounds for companies these days of consulting fees, because succession planning and many, many other aspects are really important for boards to manage. And I truly believe that with technology, we can help boards and companies having a very good grip of board effectiveness, including succession planning, of course. And that should be done in an easy and straightforward way. So that's what I am passionate about. And by the way, the third thing I'm impressed with Twitter about is that they are appointing an internal candidate, as we say, as the new CEO. We are looking at the CTO stepping up as the CEO. And that is what I would say all companies, all boards would like to have. It's an ideal situation. It's really risk minimizing. But when you think about it, it's very rare. It's very rare. But that's what succession planning is about.
Absolutely. Monica, we've only got a little bit of time left. I just want to ask you, you launched here in the UK in February last year, just before the pandemic. How's it gone so far?
It's gone well. I mean, with all the tragic with COVID, etc., digital tools are growing, also in the boardroom. So we have seen and are seeing a great growth in the UK for BoardClick and in other countries.
All right, Monica, very good to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Time now for a look at this morning's business pages, and the Financial Times splashes with news that ministers have ruled out new financial support for companies, including those in the hospitality and retail sector that face losing crucial sales over the Christmas period following the introduction of fresh coronavirus restrictions. Well, the FT leads its companies section, meanwhile, with news that the ratings agency Fitch has declared overseas bonds issued by the struggling Chinese property giant Evergrande to be in default after it failed to make a crucial interest payment. The Times leads its business pages with news that the Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has signed off on plans to force FTSE 350 companies to give work to challenger audit firms in a move to reduce the dominance of the Big Four, KPMG, EY, PwC and Deloitte, in the accounting industry. It also reports that Go-Ahead is facing a suspension of trading in its shares. That's after the bus and train operator said there'd be a delay in the publication of its annual accounts. Well, that story also makes the front page of the Daily Telegraph business section, but the paper leads with news that a number of leading employers in the financial services sector, including Deutsche Bank, PwC, KPMG and JP Morgan, all propose keeping their offices open to staff and continue with face-to-face meetings despite Boris Johnson's work-from-home guidance earlier in the week. Well, joining me as ever on a Friday, it's the financial markets commentator, Neil Collins. Neil, very good morning to you. We obviously have this big shareholder vote at Shell today to approve their shareholder restructuring, but you still think there's a lot to be said about Cambo, the decision there they pulled out from last week.
Well, I think it's a very disappointing decision, and really it's a straw in the wind, and we are in danger of destroying our heritage, really, for oil and gas at a time when energy prices are high and, as far as I can see, likely to stay that way. If you look at the gas market particularly, what has been described as a spike could well turn out to be more of a plateau, because what is happening is that the reserves in Western Europe are at an 8-year low. The cold weather has arrived earlier in Europe, so the demand is higher. The Russians are reluctant to help us in any way, as we can see in various ways. And the outlook there is for continued high prices. And I don't think this has really sunk in yet. Certainly it hasn't sunk in at retail level. People are complaining about the latest price cap, but really, when the next one comes in, which will just about coincide when their tax bill goes up for the national insurance, they will see another nasty increase in the cost of gas. And I think that we are being very foolish by not exploiting all the oil and gas that we have. And I'm very disappointed that Shell appears to have capitulated to the green blob who are saying that we should stop exploiting oil. We really can't afford not to, because there's no way that the renewables are going to fill the gap in the short term. And if we don't want to be dark and cold, we need more oil and gas. It's as simple as that.
Now, Neil, another story that's caught your eye this week, we mentioned it on the programme a couple of days ago, Lion Trust acquiring Majidi, which is an institutional fund manager. You smell a rat here.
It's not so much a rat. You have to ask yourself why these fund management groups merge. Is it to do better for the owners of the capital that they're looking after? Or is it because a bigger company means that they can pay themselves more? Because obviously the fees are linked to the value of the capital under management. And this is the thing that really drives these funds. You know, the performance is very nice to have, but the thing that really counts is the amount that we have that they have under management. And that it's much easier to get it by advertising and promotion and telling people how wonderful you are and how green you are, than actually getting into the marketplace and performing with that capital. That's very tough and slow. Much quicker to buy something else or merge and tell everybody that you've got 20 experts where you only had 10 before, so therefore everything will be even better. And history shows it ain't true.
Yeah, well, John Irons from Lion Trust is a regular guest on this programme, so I'll be putting those points to him hopefully sometime soon. Neil, good to see you as ever. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And when was the last time you had an actual meeting which didn't involve staring into a screen? Well, new data from the workplace technology service FreeSpace shows that the use of meeting rooms is at its highest rate for 2 years. But with the emergence of the new Omicron variant, is that all about to change? Well, the chief executive of FreeSpace is Raj Krishnamurthy, and he joins me now. Raj, very good morning to you. I mean, it's worth pointing out occupancy levels are still well below where they were in 2019.
Indeed. Good morning, Ian. Thanks for having me. Yes, we were hitting peaks of 51, 55% pre-pandemic, but now we are at globally at a 24% occupancy in offices around the world. So we are far from where the rates were pre-pandemic. And you're right, the interest in collaboration and meeting room spaces has been significant. But you can see the effects of things like the Omicron announcement in this little graph that you see, where the peaks that we had in November for the UK occupancy itself is dropping down post the announcement. People are reacting to that and they are not coming as much as they were in November. This is in the first week of December, in the second week of December that we've been seeing.
From your conversations with clients, do you think many of them are going to take seriously the latest work from home instructions that Boris Johnson's issued? I mean, we've just heard the Telegraph reporting today, the likes of JP Morgan and so on are going to continue to encourage people to come to work.
I think our clients definitely are very, very cautious in their approach. They're right from the time we've engaged that they've taken great precautions for social distancing in the office, providing the kind of sanitation requirements that is needed to keep the hygiene up. And they've always been open to their employees as well to give them the option and the choice to come in to work when it was safe to do so. I think that will continue to do. I think we have to appreciate that many of us, and especially given the fact that you can see from the fact that the occupancy of the meeting rooms and the collaboration spaces has been ever so much in November. People are coming in for a purpose for them to have the social interaction that they don't get from working from home. So the clients are encouraging coming back to the office, but obviously only if it is safe and if they can give that assurance to employees that they'll have a safe environment in the office. Yes, they will be cautious about the government advisory, and they will be observing what is happening in the marketplace with how the Omicron variant plays out. But the choice aspect will be a big aspect that the clients will include in their communications to employees.
All right, Raj Krishnamurthy, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, still to come here on Ian King Live. The Welsh Whisky Company helping the homeless this Christmas, if they can sort supplies out. Stay tuned.
Hannah Thomas-Peter, and I'm Sky's climate change correspondent. The UK is a world leader in wind power. Power! Power! People! It's part of the Congo Basin rainforest, which is such an important ecosystem. It's known as the lungs of Africa. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. She doesn't really enjoy speaking to the press, and it wasn't clear right up until the last moment that she was going to sit down with me.
I might be just very naive, but I do believe that change is possible, otherwise we wouldn't be climate activists.
I'm confident for the last 30 years we have known how bad it is. I'm not here to apologize, I'm here to fight for the next step.
You can see just the piles and piles of stuff, these sofas and people's desks and children's books, and you can see inside this home here people trying to sort out their home. It's just been devastating.
I think everything's at stake. The future of our planet, the future of the beauty around us, the future of you and me.
Welcome back. A couple of brief bits of breaking news to mention to you. One is that on the Julian Assange case, Stella Morris, who's Julian Assange's fiancée, has said in the last few moments that they will be appealing the case as soon as they can possibly do so. That's the decision to extradite him to the United States. And secondly, Shell's shareholders, as I mentioned earlier in the programme, a preliminary vote from the company suggests that Shell's shareholders have voted in favour of relocating the company's headquarters from the Netherlands to the UK and rechristening it Shell. More on both those stories throughout the morning here on Sky News. But now the latest whisky from the Penderyn distillery in South Wales is being launched today, a special charity bottle with £1 going towards the Hiraeth campaign for Welsh homelessness and mental health issues. But problems with the supply chain are holding things up. So what's going on? Well, joining me now is the Chief Executive of Penderyn, Stephen Davis. Stephen, very good morning to you. You better explain first of all what Hiraeth is.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful Welsh word, Ian, which it kind of reflects a longing for home. It's a word that's not very easy to translate into English, I'm afraid, but it's an essence of Welshness that we carry with us wherever we are in the world. And we thought, in the current circumstances where travelling has been such a challenge, it would be a beautiful thing to celebrate. But as you said, it's been very difficult to get the product onto the market with a combination of issues in the supply chain, with just basically getting glass bottles, getting them decorated, getting transport to get the stuff in, and then we fill it with our matured whiskey, and then getting it back out again has been an issue where, whether it's in the UK or whether it's abroad. So it's a fabulous product, but it's just been very, very challenging to get it into the market in a sort of timely way.
And where do you source the bottles from, Stephen?
These bottles, most of the bottles we source come from France. They come from within Europe, and generally we have very long-term relationships with our suppliers. But I guess a bit post-pandemic, things have just got that bit difficult with a combination of issues that they've been having. They've had issues with rising prices, gas prices, material prices, and they've experienced heavy demand as well. So they've had a lot of demands on them. We've been experiencing heavy demand as well. You know, we've seen great growth in the business. Business is going very, very well. But then these things sort of hit you, and the little niggles here and there which kind of slow things down and, spoil the good news a little bit.
I mean, Jerez, this is a limited edition bottling. I mean, how many bottles are you looking to produce?
There'd be about 10,000 that would go into Europe and about 5,000 into the US normally. It's one of our series of whiskies that we call Icons of Wales, that tell stories about Wales that hopefully will mean something a little bit further afield than just in our country. So we launched this series. We normally launch one a year, sometimes two, and this is very special because of the charity element as well. So we're very, it's a beautiful design product. It's a great way to celebrate that wonderful Hiraeth word. But as I say, it's for some of our very loyal customers who've been waiting quite a long time now. They're probably going to be a bit frustrated, and we're doing our best to catch up, but it's been challenging.
Well, Stephen, best of luck with the launch, and hope to see you again very soon. Thanks very much indeed for joining me.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's it from me. I'm back on Monday at 10 o'clock. In the meantime, stay tuned. Up next, it's Adam Bolton with All Out Politics. Cheerio.
Of the Ecuadorian embassy, Julian Assange has been in custody waiting for a decision about whether or not he will be extradited to the US. And earlier this year, in January, the magistrates court decided to block his extradition on the grounds that he was mentally unwell and that he was at risk of suicide if he was taken to the US. But today, the High Court here, 2 judges have decided that they take on board the US's package of assurances that he will not be taken to one of the strictest high security prisons in the US, that if he is found guilty on US soil, he will be sent to Australia to serve his sentence, that he will be looked at by psychiatrists. The judges here today took all of that on board and decided that they agreed that he could be extradited. So they have now sent that decision back to the magistrates court, who've been instructed to send it on to the Secretary of State. So it is a highly significant moment, not quite the end of the road yet in terms of this long, convoluted legal battle. And as you can see, plenty of Julian Assange's protesters, supporters who've been following him throughout this long legal process have gathered outside the High Court. They say this is about free speech. The US, though, of course, say that he has broken rules around espionage, around the leaking of documents, highly sensitive documents relating to the Afghan and Iraq war. So this has been a long process. He was in the Ecuadorian embassy first 10 years ago, avoiding extradition to Sweden over sexual assault charges. He always denied those charges. They were later dropped, but always hanging over Julian Assange has been this threat of extradition to the US. And today, as you say, a step forward for the US's legal teams as a High Court decided to quash that earlier decision in the Magistrates Court.
Presumably, Ali, there can be further legal appeals, and also, am I right in thinking that ultimately it will be the decision of the government whether they deport Mr. Assange or not to America?
Yeah, so there could be further appeals, and we expect that Julian Assange's team are likely to appeal this. But as I say, what happens now is it's sent back to the Magistrates Court, and they have been instructed by the judges at the High Court today to send this on to the Secretary of State, which ultimately could be where the decision lies. So this has been a long legal process. It's not over yet, but 10 years since he first went into the Ecuadorian embassy. Today, a decision that could lead to his extradition to the US.
Ali Fortescue, thank you very much indeed from the High Court there. Well, it's hard to imagine the Prime Minister has had a good night's sleep. Well, we can only speculate as to whether it's his new baby daughter keeping him awake or mutinous MPs. Pressure is mounting over a series of mistakes, scandals, and it appears parties. And Boris Johnson's integrity is again under the spotlight after accusations that he misled his own ethics advisor. An official report suggests Mr. Johnson gave differing accounts to investigations looking into the costly redecoration of the flat he occupies in Downing Street. Next week could be even worse for Mr. Johnson. He's facing the biggest revolt of his premiership. As many as 50 Conservative MPs are threatening to vote against his plans for compulsory COVID passports. Well, with me to try and make sense of it all is our political editor, Sam Coates, who, of course, broke the story yesterday about the Prime Minister's different versions of what he knew about the decoration of his flat. Sam Coates, let's just first of all talk about parties. Everyone is now talking about Downing Street parties. Is the official line still that these parties may not have happened?
It is. But there has been a development overnight, and that development was that it has been confirmed to Sky News and others that the most senior communication figure in Number 10, Jack Doyle, attended the event that's been dominating the coverage for last week. That's the December the 18th Christmas party that Downing Street denies took place. We are told that Jack Doyle both gave a speech to staff and handed out, as it were, awards, humorous awards, just to thank the people that he worked with for the tasks that they were doing. We're told that he would give a weekly speech, so my sources stress that this doesn't prove that there was a party, but it does place the man who orchestrated the government's communication approach to this whole affair for the last 9 days, which was all hinged on a denial that any event took place. It does place him at whatever was going on at the heart of Downing Street And if the investigation into this concludes that there was a party and that Jack Doyle decided that the government line was to lie about it, then that basically makes his job look increasingly untenable. I think that placing somebody so senior at the heart of the events that we've been discussing for the last 9 days is yet another big blow for Boris Johnson.
Do we know definitively that the man doing the investigation, Simon Case, did not attend any of these alleged gatherings?
The word definitively is quite hard to ever know, but we are told that he was not there on December the 18th at that event. We're told that categorically by multiple sources, so I think we have to take that on trust. And we do not have reports that he was at any of the other events that we're talking about, perhaps unlike the political chief of staff, Dan Rosenfeld, who was there on one of the events, allegedly, where there was a Zoom quiz, a Zoom Christmas quiz. So other senior figures, yes, no reports of Simon Case, and he's the person doing the investigation.
People may not quite understand it. I mean, presumably the point about talking about Zoom quizzes or mock award, end-of-year award ceremonies just shows that these things were planned.
Yes, the significance of there being mock award secret Santas for the December the 18th gathering shows that there was, as I understand it, 2 to 3 weeks planning in some cases, suggestions of a date, effectively invites going out. It depends what everybody thinks the definition of a party is, but it's quite hard to escape the very strong impression that whatever was going on December the 18th in Downing Street wouldn't fit some people's definition of a party.
Now, clearly a lot of questions are being asked about the Prime Minister's integrity. Is it really possible, as the Daily Telegraph reports this morning, that his second ethics advisor could be considering resigning?
Well, Christopher Geit, Lord Geit, who was the Queen's private secretary, currently holds the role of Minister Advisor on Ethics to Boris Johnson, has done for a few months since the last one departed, is today looking... his own integrity is being called into question because Christopher Geit concluded back in May that Boris Johnson didn't know anything about the payments that were coming from a Tory donor to fund the refurbishment of his own flat until February of this year. But the Electoral Commission, as we revealed on your programme this time yesterday, looked at the WhatsApps and concluded that Boris Johnson was dealing directly with the donor himself back in November, 3 months earlier. Lord Brownlow, who was the chair of the trust and ultimately also funded the work, and that has effectively undermined Christopher Geit. There are reports that he is seeking assurances and clarification about this, but he is presumably a man of honour, and if he feels that he was not told the truth by the Prime Minister and others in Downing Street, it is not hard to imagine that he might want to absolve himself of the role that he currently holds.
Well, obviously, massive turmoil in Number 10, but is that the Prime Minister's biggest problem as far as the parliamentary party, his own MPs, are concerned?
I think what's going on is that there is increasingly what looks like a perfect storm. And there is no doubt there is a sulphurous mood at the moment, not least because many of them are unhappy at the biggest policy announcement that we've had this week, which is to revert to Plan B to tackle coronavirus in England. As you say, there are up to 50 Conservatives on the record saying that they might rebel. And looking down that list, it's from all wings of the party, Adam. You've got Ian Duncan-Smith, the former leader, Graham Brady, who's chair of the influential 1922 Backbench Committee, 2019 as MPs have been there for 30 years. From every wing, there is unhappiness now. So that's looking like it's going to be a difficult parliamentary moment, though, of course, because Labour back Plan B, there's unlikely to be a defeat. There's also a by-election next week because of the departure of Owen Paterson in Shropshire. That was a departure that took place because of a sleaze scandal. Boris Johnson got his fingers burnt over that. I've spent the morning ringing round Conservative MPs to ask how bad is it really, and some of them have been very candid, knowing that their names wouldn't be used. Let me read you some of the remarks of one. One of the reasons, this veteran MP said, so many colleagues are so cross is because we work hard and do a job but are undermined. It is demeaning. This is Boris Johnson's behaviour. It is demeaning and it is embarrassing, and it plays at Boris's character. You have to ask, does a leopard ever change his spots? Boris Johnson is in the role of Prime Minister because the Conservative Parliamentary Party think he is the best person to win elections. If the Conservative Parliamentary Party conclude that that is no longer the case, then I think there is a big problem ahead for him.
Sam Coates, thank you very much indeed. Moving on now, let's talk about the revolt in the Conservative Party against the Prime Minister, which has gone beyond the House of Commons. Joining me is the former chairman of South Basildon Conservatives, who resigned over COVID Plan B, Charlie Sanson. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Sanson. I want to talk to you, first of all, about the... I'm sorry, I'm going to break away, Mr. Sanson. We can go back to the High Court now, where Julian Assange's lawyer is speaking.
Decided against Julian on this occasion on the basis of political assurances, non-assurances that the US has given to the UK government. I say non-assurances. Amnesty International says non-assurances. Amnesty International has analysed these assurances and have said that they are inherently unreliable. They incorporate the possibility of breaking those assurances in their very wording. Today, it's been almost a year since I stood outside court with our victory of the blocking of the extradition. For the past year, and the past year, 2 years and a half, Julian has remained in Belmarsh prison, and in fact, he has been detained since the 7th of December 2010 in one form or another, 11 years. For how long can this go on? Today is International Human Rights Day. What a shame, how cynical. To have this decision on this day, to have one of the foremost publisher, journalist of the past 50 years in a UK prison, accused of publishing the truth about war crimes, about CIA kill teams. And in fact, every time we have a hearing, we know more about the abusive nature, the criminal nature of this case. Julian exposed the crimes of CIA torturers, of CIA killers, and now we know that those CIA killers were planning to kill him too. How can these courts approve an extradition request under these conditions? How can they accept an extradition to the country that plotted to kill Julian, that plotted to kill a publisher because of what he published? This goes to the fundamentals of press freedom and of democracy. We will fight. Every generation has an epic fight to fight, and this is ours, because Julian represents the fundamentals of what it means to live in a free society, of what it means to have press freedom, of what it means for journalists to do their jobs without being afraid of spending the rest of their lives in prison. The UK imprisons journalists. They're imprisoning Julian on behalf of a foreign power which is taking an abusive, vindictive prosecution against a journalist, and this is what it's about. I urge everyone to come together and fight for Julian. Julian represents all our liberties and all our rights. Thank you.
Well said, son. Thank you,
Well, that was Stella Morris, who is the fiancée and mother of Julian Assange's children. Clearly very emotional there, claiming that on Human Rights Day, her husband's rights, her partner's rights were clearly being violated following that decision at the appeal court that he can be extradited to the United States. Well, let's go back to the mood in the Conservative Party against the Prime Minister. And joining us now is the man who was the chairman of South Basildon Conservatives until he resigned yesterday. Mr. Sanson, why did you resign?
I think health is being used as a tool to take back and or to take away and then give back people's freedom. I don't think health should be used that way. It's an inherent right, and I think the government are taking liberties with people.
So what is wrong with asking people to take precautions to protect their own health and the health of other people?
Nothing's wrong with asking people to take precautions, but that's not what the government are doing. They're now telling you that you can or cannot go into certain places unless you've had a jab. And then there's talk about eventually they're going to have a conversation about mandatory vaccination. Such a dark road to go down. No one should have the right to tell you as a sovereign person what to put in your body. No one.
Have you had vaccinations, incidentally?
I have, but that was my choice.
And what do you think of people who are not having vaccinations and who are apparently now more likely to be vectors of the disease and also themselves more likely to face severe medical consequences?
I think that we've had coronavirus news given to us now for the past 2 years. I think if an adult comes to the decision that they do not want to be vaccinated, their decision should be respected. As we've seen, having a vaccination does not stop the spread. So I believe in everyone's right to decide for themselves.
Presumably, to rise to your position, you must have been an active Conservative for quite a long time.
I was, yes, and it was quite a difficult decision to come to the realisation that I couldn't travel any further down this road with the Conservative Party. I didn't necessarily want to do it. I was hoping for the best, but I've been hinting and having conversations that I think that the government is going in this direction for the past 6 or 7 months, and I've been ignored, and now it's come to fruition. I just think that some people need to take a principled stand and actually do exactly how they feel in their gut. And it's so good to see that MPs now are coming to the same realisation and doing what they must to represent their constituents.
What do you think of Boris Johnson's leadership?
It's calamitous. He come into power with so much promise because of his majority, and everyone believed in Brexit. Well, I say everyone, I did, and the people that voted for him did. And it kind of went downhill really quickly. And I think that the coronavirus pandemic has really exposed how inept he is at keeping his ship going in the same direction. And it's sad to see because people have lost family members without being able to see them because of these measures, and they're seeing people having parties and breaking the rules, and these are the people that are making the rules for us. And as normal as is expected of good, decent British citizens, we're playing by the rules. And when the people above us are not, it kind of smacks us in the face, and it's really, really disrespectful to everyone who's played their part.
So you don't think personal liberties should have extended last Christmas to breaking the rules and having parties?
I don't think that the government should be telling us to stay indoors and not see our dying relatives and then go and have a jolly up. No, I 100% don't agree with that. And I think that everyone up and down the country would probably agree with that as well.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Sanson there, former Conservative leader. Well, later on, we're going to speak to someone who knows what it's like to be under pressure in 10 Downing Street. That's at around about 11:30. Theresa May's former Chief of Staff and, of course, former Conservative MP, Gavin Barwell. Now, let's get a reminder for the rest of us how the rules have changed. Face masks will be required in more public settings, including theatres and cinemas, but masks will not be needed in pubs or restaurants. From Monday, people are being asked to work from home where possible. And from Wednesday, the NHS COVID pass will be required for visitors to nightclubs, indoor unseated venues with more than 500 people, unseated outdoor venues with more than 4,000 people, and any event attended by more than 10,000 people. Officials in Scotland have gone further. Public Health Scotland is calling for all Christmas parties to be banned. Well, Charlotte Lomas joins us now in central London. Charlotte, regulations are coming thick and fast. How are the public you're encountering responding?
Hi, Adam. Well, the majority of people I've been talking to do think this is the right thing to do, that it's sensible, and they'll be complying with the new restrictions. We're here in the heart of the West End. You can walk to the National Gallery from here, a whole host of theatres and museums. And as of today, if you want to go and visit them, you will have to wear your face mask. And it's already a legal requirement to wear them on public transport and in shops. And that's been the case since the end of November. And now that mandate has been extended to include the majority of indoor settings now, Adam. That will also include activity centres such as bowling alleys and soft play centres, and also beauty salons and hairdressers. You'll have to wear a face mask. And as I said, the majority of people think this is the right thing to do in order to try and combat the spread of Omicron. The government really wants to slow that down to allow more people to get vaccinated, more people to get their booster jab, and try and delay that rapid rise of cases that we've been seeing.
Thank you very much indeed for that. This is All Out Politics. Coming up, we'll be having The View looking at the opinions in today's newspapers and news websites, including this cartoon featuring Boris Johnson with news for the nation. Alas, I must tell you that the number of reported parties is doubling every day.
Well, mental health care is overstretched for all of our people. The expert panel that I chair looked at mental health care in the round, and it included children and young people. And what we did was gather evidence both from patients and also from doctors and other healthcare workers, and we compared that to government data and other data that we could find. And we gave ratings for the mental health pledges that the government had made, and found that in all areas it requires improvement. That includes children and young people. And the main problem was that access to mental health care wasn't as good as it should have been, or wasn't as good as it had been promised to be. And also when young people have a crisis, that crisis is not dealt with as efficiently as it should be. So it is worrying. It's not only worrying for children, though. Our expert panel, our work judged pledges that started to be made pre-pandemic. And what is a bit disheartening is that the pledges were not on track to be met before the pandemic even started. So the pandemic has undoubtedly made things worse. It doesn't alter what we found in our work, though, because we deliberately excluded the influence of the pandemic from our judgments. But there is no doubt that during the pandemic, there has been an increase in people having concerns about their well-being, and there is a debate about how much of that is actually legitimate concern. However, some of that concern has gone on to become significant.
Time now for The View, and of course there's one big story dominating the agenda of the comment pages. Here in the Daily Telegraph is Boris Johnson standing behind a lectern with some news for the nation. Alas, I must tell you that the number of reported parties is doubling every day. In the Daily Telegraph, Fraser Nelson, the editor of The Spectator, says Conservative MPs haven't lost confidence in Boris Johnson, but wait for it, they never had much in the first place. Jason Groves in the Daily Mail, the political editor of the Daily Mail, asked, could the Tories really do the unthinkable? He forecasts that next week could be even tougher for the Prime Minister, because on Tuesday he's like to face the biggest revolt of his premiership when MPs vote on the new Plan B restrictions. James Forsyth, also of The Spectator, picks up the same theme in his column in The Times, noting that he is married to Allegra Stratton, who resigned as a Conservative spokesperson on Wednesday. James Forsyth warns that the Prime Minister's relations with his own MPs are at breaking point, predicting mass panic if the Conservatives lose next Thursday's by-election in North Shropshire. In the Times, Peter Brooks, the cartoonist, has a somewhat cynical take on the one bit of genuinely good news in Downing Street this week. There's the Prime Minister asking, who's the sweetest little diversionary tactic of them all? And in The Guardian, Devi Sridhar, the expert asks, what does really matter? The public health expert argues that reports of festive revelry in Downing Street have resulted in a loss of trust in political leadership, which he describes as a major blow during a pandemic. Well, joining me today to look through those are the Guardian columnist Polly Toynbee and the chief political correspondent at City AM, Stefan Boscher. Welcome to you both. Now, Polly Toynbee, it's interesting that point that Debbie Sridhar makes about the loss of confidence in the government, because as far as we can tell, and we were just hearing from the West End of London,